Sergeant William Hayes had served as a royal guard for 8 years, standing proudly at the entrance of Buckingham Palace. His uniform was always immaculate, his posture perfect, and his dedication unwavering. Coming from a working-class family, in Manchester, this position meant everything to him. He had earned his place through years of military service and rigorous training, proving himself worthy of protecting the royal family. Every morning, William would arrive an hour early too, ensured his uniform was spotless and his boots gleamed like mirrors. The other guards respected him for his professionalism and kind nature. Despite the formal requirements of his role, William always managed a subtle nod or gentle smile for tourists, who showed genuine respect and curiosity about the palace. On this particular autumn morning, palace grounds were bustling with activity. A high-profile charity event was scheduled for the afternoon, and wealthy donors from across London were expected to attend. Security had been increased, and all guards were reminded to maintain the highest standards of presentation and conduct. Among the invited guests was the Blackwell family, known throughout London's elite circles for their vast fortune made in real estate and banking. The family patriarch, Lord Blackwell, was a respected businessman who had donated millions to various causes over the years. However, his youngest son, 22-year-old Sebastian Blackwell, earned a very different reputation. Sebastian was notorious among London's social scene for his arrogant behavior and complete disregard for anyone he considered beneath his social status. Despite his father's attempts to instill proper values, Sebastian had grown up believing that wealth gave him the right to treat others however he pleased. His expensive education at elite private schools had only reinforced his sense of superiority. As the morning progressed, early guests began arriving for the charity event. William maintained his position at the main entrance, greeting each visitor with professional courtesy while carefully checking their invitations and credentials. His sharp eyes and years of experience allowed him to quickly identify potential security concerns while ensuring that legitimate guests felt welcomed and respected. The atmosphere was pleasant and dignified until the Blackwell family's luxury vehicle pulled up to the palace entrance. Lord Blackwell emerged first, followed by his wife, both dressed impeccably and conducting themselves with appropriate dignity. Then Sebastian stepped out, and William immediately sensed trouble. The young man's entire demeanor radiated contempt and superiority. He wore a custom-tailored suit that cost more than William's monthly salary, and his expression suggested he found the entire event beneath his attention. Sebastian looked around the palace grounds as if he owned them, his gaze settling on the guards with obvious disdain as the family approached the entrance. William stepped forward to perform his duties, completely unaware that this routine interaction would change his life forever. William approached the Blackwell family with his usual professional demeanor. "Good afternoon," he said respectfully. "May I please see your invitations?" Lord and Lady Blackwell immediately produced their elegant invitations and smiled warmly. At William, they understood protocol and appreciated the guard's dedication to security. However, Sebastian made no move to retrieve his invitation, instead staring at William with obvious irritation. "Seriously?" Sebastian said loudly, his voice dripping with contempt. "You're going to make us stand here like common criminals while you play soldier?" William remained calm, having dealt with difficult guests before. "Sir, this is standard security procedure for all visitors. I'll just need to see your invitation to verify your attendance." Sebastian's face twisted with anger. "Do you have any idea who my family is? My father could buy this entire palace if he wanted to. We don't need to prove anything to some nobody in a fancy costume." Lord Blackwell stepped forward, clearly embarrassed by his son's behavior. "Sebastian, please." "The gentleman is just doing his job," he turned to William apologetically. "I'm terribly sorry. Here are all our invitations." But Sebastian wasn't finished. The attention from other arriving guests seemed to fuel his arrogance rather than shame him into better behavior. "No, father, this is ridiculous. I'm not going. To be treated like a peasant by someone who probably makes less in a year than I spend on shoes?" William's jaw tightened slightly, but his voice remained professional. "Sir, I understand your frustration. This will only take a moment, and then you can proceed to enjoy the event." The crowd of arriving guests had begun to notice the commotion. Some watched with curiosity, while others seemed uncomfortable with Sebastian's increasingly aggressive tone. Several guards nearby shifted their positions, ready to assist if the situation escalated further. Sebastian noticed the growing attention and seemed to interpret it as validation of his importance. "Look at all these people watching," he said with a cruel smile. "They're all wondering why someone like me has to waste time with someone like you." Lady Blackwell tugged at her son's arm. "Sebastian, please, you're making a scene. Just show him your invitation so we can go inside." But Sebastian had crossed a line in his own mind. His privileged upbringing had convinced him that he could say and do whatever he pleased without consequences. He looked directly at William with pure contempt, raised his hand, did something that shocked everyone present. The sound of Sebastian spitting directly at William's face echoed across the entrance courtyard. Wade, followed by complete silence, as witnesses processed what they had just seen. The disgusting act of disrespect hung in the air like a challenge, and everyone waited to see what would happen next. The spit hit William directly on his left cheek, slowly dripping down toward his collar. The courtyard fell into absolute silence as everyone processed the shocking act of disrespect. Even Sebastian seemed momentarily surprised by his own behavior. Though he quickly masked it with a smirk of satisfaction, William stood perfectly still, feeling the warm saliva on his face, but not moving to wipe it away. His years of military training had taught him to control his emotions even in the most provoking situations. Inside, however, a fire was building that he had never experienced before. Lord Blackwell's face turned pale with horror and shame. "Sebastian," he gasped, grabbing his son's arm. "How dare you?" "Apologize immediately." Lady Blackwell covered her mouth in shock, tears beginning to form in her eyes as she realized the magnitude of her son's actions. The other guests stood frozen, unable to believe they had witnessed such a disgusting display of privilege and arrogance. Sebastian, however, seemed emboldened by the shocked reactions around him. "What?" he said with false innocence. "I'm just treating him the way people like him deserve to be treated. He should be grateful I even acknowledged his existence." One of the other guards started to step forward, his face red with anger at seeing his colleague treated so disrespectfully. But William raised his hand slightly, signaling his friend to stand down. He had something else in mind. Slowly, William reached into his uniform pocket and pulled out a pristine white handkerchief. He carefully wiped his face clean, all while maintaining eye contact with Sebastian. The young man's smirk began to fade, as he noticed something dangerous in the guard's calm demeanor. "Sir," William said quietly, his voice carrying an authority that made everyone lean in to listen. "You have just committed a criminal act of assault against a member of Her Majesty's Guard on royal property in front of numerous witnesses." Sebastian laughed nervously. "Assault? Don't be ridiculous. It's just spit. What are you going to do? Arrest me?" William folded his handkerchief carefully and returned it to his pocket. "Actually, sir, that's exactly what I'm going to do." Crowd murmured with excitement and anticipation. Lord Blackwell stepped forward desperately. "Surely we can resolve this matter privately. My son made a terrible mistake, but perhaps we could handle this without involving the authorities." William looked at Lord Blackwell with respect but determination. "Sir, I understand your position, and I have nothing but respect for you. And your wife, however, your son's actions cannot go unanswered. He chose to humiliate me in front of all these people, and now he must face the consequences of that choice." Sebastian's arrogance was beginning to crack as he realized this wasn't going according to his expectations. "You can't be serious. My father will have your job for this." William smiled for the first time since the incident began, and it was not a friendly expression. "Sir, your father is a respectable gentleman who understands the importance of accountability. Something tells me he won't be coming to your rescue this time." William activated his radio with practiced efficiency. "Control, this is Sergeant Hayes at the main entrance. I need immediate backup for an arrest. We have an assault on a royal guard with multiple witnesses present." The response was immediate and professional. "Copy that, Sergeant Hayes. Backup en route. Do you require medical assistance?" "Negative on medical, but we'll need a senior officer for processing." The suspect is a guest at today's charity event. Sebastian's face went white as the reality of the situation began to sink in. Wait, he stammered, his previous arrogance completely evaporating. This is getting out of hand. I'm sure we can work something out. Lord Blackwell stepped forward again, his own dignity intact despite his son's disgraceful behavior. Sergeant Hayes, I want you to know that my family does not condone my son's actions in any way. If you proceed with this arrest, you will have our full cooperation. The words hit Sebastian like a physical blow. For the first time in his privileged life, his father was not rushing to save him from the consequences of his actions. Father? He exclaimed in disbelief. You can't be serious. Lord Blackwell looked at his son with disappointment and shame. Sebastian, you have embarrassed our family name and disrespected a man who serves our country with honor. You made this choice, and now you must face the results. Within minutes, 2 additional guards arrived, along with a senior officer who took charge of the situation. The crowd of guests had grown larger, and many were recording the events with their phones. Sebastian's humiliation was being captured for the world to see. Sebastian Blackwell, William announced formally. You are under arrest for assault against a member of Her Majesty's Guard. You have the right to remain silent, and anything you say may be used as evidence against you in court. As the handcuffs clicked into place around Sebastian's wrists, the young man finally understood that his wealth and family name could not protect him from the consequences of his actions. The same hands that had never worked a day in his life were now bound behind his back in front of dozens of witnesses. This is insane, Sebastian shouted, his voice cracking with desperation. It was just spit. You're ruining my life over nothing. Looked at him steadily as the other officers prepared to escort him away. Sir, you chose to humiliate me in front of all these people because you thought I was powerless to respond. You were wrong. The crowd began to applaud as Sebastian was led away toward the waiting police vehicle. The sound started slowly, but grew into enthusiastic approval for William's handling of the situation. Many of the guests approached him too, expressed their support and admiration for his professionalism under such trying circumstances. Lady Blackwell approached William with tears in her eyes. Sergeant Hayes, I am so deeply sorry for my son's behavior. You showed remarkable restraint and dignity throughout this entire ordeal. William nodded respectfully. Ma'am, your son's actions reflect only on himself, not on your family. This experience teaches him something valuable about treating others with respect. News of Sebastian's arrest spread quickly through London's social media networks and news outlets. By evening, videos of the incident had gone viral, with millions of people watching the entitled young man get his comeuppance. The hashtag #RoyalGuardJustice began trending worldwide as people shared their own stories of standing up to bullies and entitled behavior. The story resonated with working class people everywhere who had faced similar disrespect from those who believed wealth made them superior. Comments poured in supporting William's actions and praising him for showing dignity under pressure. Many people shared their own experiences of being treated poorly by privileged individuals who thought they were untouchable. Sebastian spent the night in jail, an experience that shattered his worldview completely. The cold cell, uncomfortable bed, and basic food were unlike anything he had ever experienced. For the first time in his life, his money and family connections meant nothing. He was just another prisoner, treated exactly like everyone else. Meanwhile, William returned home to his modest apartment, where his phone rang constantly with interview requests from news organizations around the world. His elderly mother called from Manchester, having seen the story on television, expressing her pride in how he had handled such a difficult situation. I always knew you were special, son, she said through happy tears. You showed that boy what? Real strength, looks like. Your father would be so proud. The next morning brought unexpected developments. Lord Blackwell arrived at the palace personally, requesting a private meeting with William. The businessman looked tired and aged, clearly devastated by his son's public disgrace and the shame it had brought upon his family name. Sergeant Hayes, Lord Blackwell began, I wanted to speak with you personally about yesterday's events. My son's behavior was inexcusable, and I want you to know that he will face consequences beyond just legal punishment. William listened respectfully. As the older man continued, I've made the decision to cut Sebastian off financially until he proves he has learned from this experience. He will need to find employment and support himself, something he's never done before. Additionally, our family will be making a substantial donation to a charity supporting military veterans. The sincerity in Lord Blackwell's voice was unmistakable. I also want to offer you a position in our company's security division with a significant salary increase. Your handling of this situation showed exactly the kind of character and judgment we need. William was touched by the offer but politely declined. Sir, I appreciate your generous offer, but my place is here, serving the crown. However, I do hope your son learned something valuable from this experience. Sebastian's court appearance later that week became another media sensation. Dressed in a simple suit rather than his usual designer clothing, he looked small and defeated as he faced the judge. His expensive lawyers tried to minimize the charges, but the video evidence and multiple witness testimonies made denial impossible. Judge, unimpressed by Sebastian's privileged background, sentenced him to community service, anger management classes, and a substantial fine. More importantly, the conviction would remain on his permanent record, a lasting reminder of the consequences of treating others with disrespect. As Sebastian left the courthouse, reporters shouted questions about what he had learned from the experience. For once in his life, he had no arrogant response ready. 6 months after the incident, William received an unexpected visitor at the palace gates. Sebastian Blackwell approached slowly, looking nothing like the arrogant young man who had spat at him that autumn day. His expensive clothes had been replaced by simple work attire, and his previously perfect appearance showed signs of genuine hardship. Sergeant Hayes, Sebastian said quietly, I was wondering if I could speak with you for a moment. William studied the young man carefully, noting the profound changes in his demeanor and appearance. Gone was the smirk of superiority, replaced by genuine humility and what appeared to be hard-earned wisdom. Of course, William replied professionally. Though with less formality than their previous encounter, Sebastian took a deep breath before speaking. I wanted to apologize to you personally for my behavior that day, not because my lawyers told me to, or because my father demanded it, but because I finally understand how wrong I was. He paused, struggling with emotions he had never experienced before. These past 6 months have been the hardest of my life, but also the most important. Working minimum wage jobs, living in a tiny apartment, being treated like everyone else. It opened my eyes to how the world really works. William listened without interruption as Sebastian continued. I learned that the people I look down on are often stronger, kinder, and more deserving of respect than I ever was. I met single mothers working 2 jobs to feed their children, elderly people struggling to pay rent, young people working hard to build better lives for themselves. The sincerity in Sebastian's voice was unmistakable. He'd clearly undergone a genuine transformation through his experiences. I want you to know that what you did that day probably saved my life. If you had let me continue down that path, I would have become a monster, completely disconnected from humanity. William nodded thoughtfully. He had wondered occasionally what had become of the privileged young man whose world had crumbled in front of the palace gates. What are you doing now? He asked with genuine curiosity. Sebastian's face showed a hint of pride for the first time. I'm working at a homeless shelter downtown. Started as community service, but I asked to stay on as a paid employee. Doesn't pay much, but it's the most meaningful work I've ever done. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple envelope. I've written letters to everyone who witnessed what happened that day, apologizing for my behavior. This one is for you. William accepted the letter with respect. Sebastian, the fact that you're here having this conversation shows that you've learned something valuable. It takes courage. Sebastian's eyes filled with tears. He didn't try to hide. My father was right to cut me off, and you were right. To arrest me? For the first time in my life, I understand that actions have consequences, and that treating people with respect isn't optional based on their social status. As Sebastian prepared to leave, he turned back one final time. Sergeant Hayes, you didn't just arrest me that day. You gave me a chance to become the person I should have been all along. Thank you. William watched as Sebastian walked away. It's no longer the entitled young man who had caused such a scene, but someone who had found genuine purpose and humility through adversity. The incident that had started with such ugliness had ultimately led to redemption and growth years later. When people asked William about the most satisfying moment of his career, he never mentioned the arrest or the viral fame that followed. Instead, he spoke about a quiet conversation outside the palace gates with a young man who had learned that true strength comes from lifting others up, not putting them down. The story became legendary among the palace guards, a reminder that sometimes the greatest victories come not from defeating enemies, but from helping them become better people.